So this is the City of Bend Utilities Public Advisory Group for May of 2024. We have a few faces around the room who are going to be speakers today. Actually, Austin is not joining us, even though I have him on the title slide here. But per usual, we have Lori Faya, we have Elizabeth O'Keefe, and we've got a couple of special guests here from the Stormwater Master Plan team. We have Trista Kabluski, we have Aaron, who are both going to tee up our first topic of today's meeting, which is the Stormwater Master Plan. But I've got a little bit of UPAG business to cover before we get there. So we'll start with some introduction material, dig in on the Stormwater Master Plan, visioning and prioritization. There'll be lots of questions to ask you guys and some interactive components of that dialogue, so it'll be fun. And then about 5 or 10 minutes before the noon hour, we'll switch topics, and Elizabeth is going to introduce the Groundwater Protectiveness Report. It's a recent study, really interesting information, and we have some feedback that we're looking to the UPAG to provide on that topic as well. And then we'll close things out for today. So that's our agenda, what we have in store. This is in a few of the emails that we've sent out, but just as a reminder, our June meeting is going to be an in-person tour. We did this last year. For those of you who are in your year 2 of being part of the UPAG, it was a lot of fun. We're going to focus on stormwater. We're going to meet at Pageant Park. That's near the intersection of Nashville Avenue and Harmon Boulevard. And then we're going to do a walking tour and talk stormwater design practices and education and get some of your input and share some things. It's a great chance to see things in the field. And then we're going to have an optional lunch if you want to stick around after 12:30 and just have a chance to socialize with the city's team and with the other UPAG members. Anything else, Lori?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. I hope everybody will be able to come in person. So this is, if you're familiar, it will meet right by where the pedestrian bridge comes across Mirror Pond over on the west side. And we've been working on for a while now. I'm sure everybody remembers the Newport Avenue project. That was primarily a stormwater project, and we're adding a bunch of interpretive components. And so you guys will be one of the first groups that will take on this walking tour to talk about all these different components of stormwater management, both vegetative, above ground, talking about the outfall to the river, and talking about facilities underground as well. And we'll also have opportunity to talk about the water conservation landscape topics as well, the planter strips and all of that will flow right along with this. But I'm really excited. We're getting the last signs installed here shortly, so I hope everybody can come.
And there is, the RSVP really gives us a head count on lunch, but if you'd like to, you can also bring a colleague. If you have somebody else who's interested in stormwater or what the UPAG is up to, it is open if you have somebody else that you'd like to bring along and have join us for the day. So any questions from the group about logistics or the tour? We'll do a follow-up. Oh, and there's a save the date on folks' calendars too from me for June 5th. And I'll make sure that has the latest information about the meeting place and everything in it. Looking further down the road, in July and August, the UPAG as a full group won't meet, but we have been talking about this summer subcommittee. So we wanted to just provide a quick reminder here and share a few details on that. Mike, Rick, Brian, Tom, and Stephanie, you guys had all raised your hands to be part of these conversations through the summer months. Hopefully you're still excited about this. We are looking at erosion control standards and permitting being the topic for the July meeting. And that would really be looking at applying those standards to the smaller lot sizes. The first Wednesday, which is our typical time, is really close to the July holiday. So we were thinking July 10th, keeping our typical time of 11 to 12:30 and having that be in person. And then looking at August, it would be coming back to the Stormwater Master Plan to have some more conversation. Trista's going to expand on what that agenda would look like, but that would be the first Wednesday, August 7th, 11 to 12:30. And we just wanted to share those dates and make sure that sounds comfortable to the folks who be participating. And of course, if anybody else is interested, we'd love to collect your name, or you can follow up via email. Does that sound pretty good?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dates are good for me.
Great.
The day works good. I've got a standing meeting that finishes right at 11, so getting there in person, I might be 15 minutes later. So,
On the July. Oh, okay. Both the July and the July was the one in person.
every Wednesday through September, probably.
Woo!
One of those.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Aubrey, the sooner you can send out an invite, I mean, of course I could always put it on my calendar, but the sooner you send out an invite.
Get the hold on. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We'll do that shortly after today's meeting. We just wanted to kind of give folks a chance to chime in if these dates wouldn't work, but it sounds like generally, yes, they will. So we'll get the save the dates out. Any other thoughts from the group or anybody else interested in these topics being part of the subcommittee? Perfect. All right. Summer off is good for some of us too. Just taking a minute here to look backwards. In April, Dan and Elizabeth led kind of a two-part conversation and shared some of the data that the city is using to make decisions and a couple of pilot programs that are being tried. So I have captured a few notes and takeaways from the city team, given the UPAG conversation, and just wanted to highlight a few of those things. If folks have other reflections or takeaways, it's always great to just kind of think back on what you walked away with from those conversations. So related to the turf removal pilot program that Dan spoke about, a few of the things that came up from the UPAG were just appreciating leading with incentives, not just consequences, to move forward with that pilot, and also interest that from our landscape contractors. HOAs have been approaching folks about interest in design guides for turf removal. So there's definitely a good climate to make connections between HOAs and these resources to move that forward. We talked about a few of the challenges. Definitely the time between advertising the application and then the project completion is a concern. If we can kind of stretch that out, that will give folks more opportunity to get that work done. And part of that is, landscape capacity and availability of contractors to do that work during the summer months. It can be sometimes a very busy season and tough to get somebody engaged with short notice.
But to note, to date, we've had such an overwhelming response to rolling out the turf rebate program that so far it looks full up for the first round. We're keeping a list in case people aren't actually able to follow through, but wow, we've had a lot of phone calls.
Nice. So it's a ripe environment to step into. That's great. And then we also talked about preventing illicit discharges and thinking about the EcoBiz certification as one opportunity to get people aware and trained up on best practices. And Elizabeth shared a bit on the certification process, and the group talked through ideas around, building advocates from business owners, how important that would be, developing some case studies, finding ways to get businesses to speak to what that time and investment and also benefit means to them. We talked about a few potential challenges given the type of businesses we're talking about, and also just this idea of if there's other incentives to help recruit participants. Like if you go through the certification process, you also get added to a certified contractor list, or there's some other promotion opportunities. So those were a few of the discussion points that came up from the UPAG related to the EcoBiz certification. Any other thoughts, reflections from those two topics? There's a lot to chew on last meeting, and there will be this time too. So we've got a two-parter in store here. I'm going to turn things over here to Trista and Aaron. They're going to talk to the Stormwater Master Plan. I'm going to stop sharing, give the presenter wand here over to Aaron. And we've got some interactive components of this discussion too. So definitely looking for everybody's input as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. Really appreciate it. Hi, my name is Erin Foote-Morgan. I'm a civic engagement and strategic communications consultant and own a business here in Bend called FM Civic. and get to work with Trista and the OTAC team and Lori and this great team at the city on this stormwater master planning project. Our team is going to be working with you all, collecting your input and other community stakeholders over the course of this project to help create a public input report that will gather some of your key thoughts to help shape this plan. And we'll also be helping to tell the story of stormwater in Bend and providing some community education with a website and infographics and those kind of tools. So it's just really wonderful to meet you all here today. And Tristan and I have about 40 minutes or so. You've got a pretty full agenda. And so I'll go ahead and jump to kind of what we hope to talk to you about today. Trista, do you feel like you need to say hi again to these folks, or do they all know you by now?
I'll just say hi real quick. Trista Kobleski, stormwater planner at OTAC and the project manager for our team on the Bend Stormwater Master Plan. Very happy to be here today.
So here's what we're hoping to accomplish in our time together with you today. For starters, we want to just do a recap of kind of an overview of the Stormwater Master Planning Project. Trista will lead that for us in just a minute. And we also want to give you a progress report. Where are we at in this process and what's coming next? And then after that, we're going to get into some more fun stuff, hearing your thoughts on some visioning and prioritization of some problem and solution sets. And we will have an interactive slide deck that we're going to be dropping in the chat in just a little bit. So heads up for that. But for now, Trista, do you want to walk us through these first two goals and kick us off?
Yeah, just to recap the Stormwater Master Plan, we will be updating the 2014 plan. And what we'll be doing is assessing which drainage issues that were identified in that plan are still in need of a solution, identifying any new issues that have cropped up since then and that may need to be solved. We'd like to create a long-term plan for reducing risk to groundwater from drill holes and dry wells, create a plan for improving, to the extent that we can, quality of runoff discharge to the Deschutes River through the city's outfalls, and develop a capital program that addresses all of those problems, and some policy recommendations. And if you want to move to the next slide, you might recognize this timeline slide from our last presentation as well. So just to use this as a status report, where are we at in this process? We have begun our planning phase that is sort of our coordination and communications with the city and making sure we know the endpoint we're trying to get to. That will last all through the project that we're trying to complete by next July. And we are midway through our discovery phase. That's where we figure out what problems or issues related to the stormwater system exist in the city of Bend. We're going to start our desktop analysis. We have started our desktop analysis for the outfall retrofit portion. We've also started our desktop analysis studying the dry wells and drill holes and their impacts to groundwater. And we will soon start our climate change study. So we've identified around 50 individual point issues that are drainage and erosion related throughout the city. And today we're really getting going on our visioning phase. And that's why we're talking to you. We want to understand your vision for managing stormwater in Bend, your priorities, what you think a good utility plan is like. And we will use the information we get here today and additional information we continue to collect from staff and the community to really guide the prioritization of the problems and the prioritization of the solutions as we move forward in developing this plan. So I will pause for just a moment here to mention the things that we will cover in the August summer subcommittee meeting. The master plan will be on our agenda, and the specific items we will cover are the outfall retrofit program, our climate change research, and if time allows, we will get into some of our policy topics about drainage and density. How do we continue to manage stormwater as urban development gets more dense in the city, and regional facilities and how those relate to that drainage and density topic. So that's a preview of what we'd like to cover in the summer subcommittee. And then we will complete developing our solution set. So our solutions phase will start later this summer and go through essentially the end of the project. And our implementation phase is essentially firming up our policy recommendations and writing the plan and making sure you get a chance to see those final recommendations and how they responded to what we heard from you over this time period, and then present it to City Council. Okay, that's an overview, and let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Trista. Great overview. And we want to take a minute and just talk about you guys for a second as UPAG and remind you what your role is in all of this. You're really helping to guide not the vision of this plan, the priorities here, our policy solutions, and all of these will help to influence decision making all throughout the plan. And today in particular, we're going to focus in on this vision and priorities sections. We want to know what is most important to you and your communities. What is the story of Bend's stormwater needs and solutions? And how should we prioritize stormwater capital improvements? We've already, in your last meeting, shared some pretty important key considerations with us. Some of the topics that you raised in March were refining our stormwater solution set for higher density development and smaller lot sizes, educational resources for residential on-site stormwater management requirements, aligning master plan and codes related to residential runoff and in the right-of-way, maintenance resources for privately owned and sometimes failing stormwater facilities, and a continued focus on groundwater protection. So we want to just recap that we have heard you. There was turf in the right-of-way, and there's going to be more photos of problems with right-of-ways as we keep moving through this slide deck. So we have heard these concerns from you, and today we just want to broaden out a little bit. We'll be talking a lot more about these items in detail in these upcoming meetings that Trista mentioned, but we want to kind of come back up to like a 30,000, 40,000 foot view in our meeting today and hear a little bit more of your thoughts on some key problem and solution sets. So to do that, we're gonna get interactive here. And I am going to go to and drop a link in our chat. And we're all going to hop on some Google Slides on this Google slide deck together. So what you want to do is click on the link that I just shared in your chat. Open it up. I can see all of you hopping on here. You are anonymous dolphins and goose and leopards and things like that. Yep. So pop this open and scroll down to slide 7. We are, Trista's going to lead you through some key, some educational slides here that help us think about some big themes, some big challenges facing the stormwater system in Bend. She's going to share some education with you on these, and then we're going to ask for your input on some things. And I want to you've been given a lot of control here, a lot of power by having access to the deck. And we want you to be really great participants, though, and stick with us. Try not to jump ahead too far and don't go moving bubbles around yet. We'll get there in just a minute. And so Trista will walk you through these sections, and this is a great learning moment. In addition to being an input session, we want you to ask questions to Trista about these problem areas, and let's have a bit of a discussion. And with that, Trista, do you want to take us through some of these key prioritization areas for really problems facing the stormwater system?
Yeah, thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
Yep, so here on slide 7 are the 4 problem areas that we're going to talk about: ponding and flooding, erosion and sediment, groundwater quality, and surface water quality. And just a little introduction, none of these issues are mutually exclusive. So there are overlaps, there are similarities. At the same time, there are some unique things about each of these. So they're worth talking about separately. Another thing to keep in mind, even though we're going to ask you your opinions about these, maybe which are the most important to work on, please know that the final master plan will include documenting all of these issues and solutions of some kind to all of these issues. So when we're asking you which one's more important or things like that, it's really helping us to find a balance in the final master plan between the types of problems we want to address and then the types of solutions that we'll want to use to address those issues. So it's not about excluding anything, but it is helping us achieve a balance that reflects the community's priorities. So with that, we'll go on to ponding and flooding. So understand that UPAG hasn't talked a ton about ponding and flooding and its relationship to the stormwater system. So this topic might be a little newer to you as UPAG members, but probably not new to you as people who live and work in Bend. So as you may know, sometimes the residential and the more collector and arterial streets have flooding issues resulting from either a lack of a stormwater system or the stormwater system being undersized, or maybe the stormwater system failing. And you know, there are a few underpasses where the flooding gets pretty severe, the road gets shut down. It's a real safety issue in those locations, and we have a photo of one of those. Other places, residential streets, it's not as big a concern for safety, but there's some convenience issues. Property damage can occur from ponding and some of the stormwater flooding. And then there's a cost to respond as well from the city. So those are some of the main issues. As you can see, this can occur in winter, can occur in the spring, and occasionally it can occur in the summer these days. So this is a year-round problem. And in some places it's fairly frequent, a couple times a year. And in other places it's less frequent, but does occur. So many of the issues that we've documented, like I said, we have about 50 issues that we've documented so far, locations where the community and staff have noted that the stormwater system is not working for one reason or another. Many of them are the ponding and flooding issues where a road or a property turns into a little pond like this. And any questions on this one before we move on? All right. Erosion and sediment. This one is quite related to the ponding and flooding at times. So as you know, when stormwater turns to runoff, it flows over the land and it can erode the landscape, landscaping in the right-of-way. It can mobilize sands and gravel that were placed for snow and ice safety in the winter. It can actually erode the street away. It can erode private property, creating rills or little ravines. It can coat the street with dirt. So erosion and sediment cause this property damage. One main impact that it has is clogging the storm system. So that's how it's related to the ponding. If it's clogging the storm system can't function well to remove the runoff. Erosion and sediment can contribute to degradation of groundwater if it's flowing through the UICs to the groundwater, contribute to degradation of the surface water, the river. I already mentioned that it can contribute to ponding and flooding, and it increases maintenance costs. So the city's costs to maintain the storm sewer system go up when sediment is entering the inlets, the catch basins, and the UICs. Also, the replacement costs could go up as it could cause these facilities to stop functioning over time. Any questions on the erosion and sediment issue? I will mention that some of this damage is to private property. The photo on the top right is actually, it's hard to tell from that photo, but that is a private home next to a residential street. It's lower than the street and lower than the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. And the runoff, that sheet flows off the road onto that property, is eroding the road onto their property. They also get, it's a ponding issue, they get flooding in their garage and on their home. So that's how the two are related. If we move on to groundwater quality. Oops, there we go. The issue here is the safety of the drinking water supply and compliance with the water pollution facilities control permit that Oregon DEQ issues to the city. Why is this related to stormwater? I think you've heard a lot about this, so I won't get into too much detail, but the underground injection control facilities operated by the city that inject stormwater into the ground, some of them are pretty close to drinking water supply wells. And there's a contamination possibility since stormwater carries not only the sediment that we talked about earlier, but dissolved pollutants that can impact the drinking water quality. So we want to be cautious about that. And we've already heard you that groundwater quality is important to you. So we are aware of that. And lastly, surface water quality. City does have a number of outfalls to the Deschutes River. An outfall is the end of a pipe that is next to a natural water body like the river that carries stormwater. And the suitability of the river for aquatic wildlife habitat is in question. Suitability of the river for recreation and enjoyment. The city has a municipal stormwater permit that I believe you've heard about, and it is a requirement to develop a plan to protect the river from stormwater runoff that enters it through those outfalls. And it's not an issue yet, but you can see from the map, and this is a little bit older map, but Oregon DEQ has designated both the Deschutes River and Tumalo Creek as having impairments. And that means they don't meet surface water quality standards for temperature, pH, turbidity, which is a measure of water clarity, and sedimentation, which is basically sediments that reach the bottom of the water body and sit there. And that acronym TMDL stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. It's essentially a regulation that requires cleanup actions or mitigation measures to improve water quality so that it does meet the state standards. for any impairment that's been identified. There is no TMDL yet, just to clarify, but there are possibilities of future TMDLs because of the impairments that exist in the Deschutes and Tumalo Creek. And one thing to note is that some of the impairments cannot be fully attributed to stormwater runoff. So we don't want to overstate the impact of stormwater runoff to some of these impairments, but it is a contributing factor. And because the city has a requirement to do a retrofit, outfall retrofit program, the master plan will have, some solutions to this. Okay, I think that's it for that. I don't want to spend too much time here because we then want to get to the interactive portion.
Yeah, thank you, Trista. That was wonderful overview. And as she mentioned, every one of these areas matters, and all of them will be addressed in the plan to varying degrees, but it's about finding the balance across these and determining some priorities. And so we're hopeful that you will all come to slide 12 now in your deck and share with us your thoughts on how to begin to prioritize some of these problem areas. And so here's what we'd love for you to do. We would like for you to think of these four problems that Trista just shared, and take one of those greenish bubbles at the top and place it in the box that indicates your highest priority for being addressed in the Stormwater Master Plan. And the orangish bubble should represent your second highest priority. And just grab one and drop those bubbles in those boxes. Don't need to overthink this. This is kind of a snapshot in time here today to help us understand where you guys are at. Don't need to go back or think too hard here. Just share your initial thoughts with us. These were originally going to be Go Ducks green and yellow bubbles, but Lori did not like that. No, she didn't like that at all. So we have City of Bend greenish and orangish bubbles. If you have any questions as you're thinking about this, go ahead and share them with us. It's a great moment to discuss a little bit.
This is hard, of course, because these are all important.
I know they are. Yes. They are. And
by
yeah,
that,
go
do you mean both
bees.
the ducks and the beavers are all important, or do you mean
Right.
that these four issues are all important?
No, only the beavers are important. Especially with, when it's down to the pack 2. Do you guys want us staff to do this, or should we do that separately some other time?
Let's just have UPAG here, and we should definitely we can collect your guys' thinking on here too. I'm really curious for you guys as well. I see some bubbles still clicking around.
Wow, nobody cares about flooding under the Greenwood underpass.
I think it's already being addressed with the Midtown Crossing projects.
Maybe.
Okay.
Does that change your answer?
So the river definitely stands out a bit. Any other folks have bubbles still left to maneuver around? I think we'll probably we can roll on then to our next topic. So we move to slide 13 here. Trista will take us through through two main solution sets for how we can address these issues. And Trista, take it away.
Thanks, Erin, and thanks everyone for participating on slide 12. So those were more about the problems or the focus areas, balancing those. And now we want to take a moment to get your vision for how we will formulate solutions. And these are two big buckets. So this isn't about individual types of solutions, but more about how to focus our efforts or the city's efforts in solving problems. And one a big category, a way we could do that is to maintain and repair the existing stormwater system. I think you are aware there are more than 7,000 UICs. There's an area in Central Bend on both sides of the river that has a piped storm system and outfalls to the river. There is existing infrastructure throughout the city. It does require maintenance to continue to function. Sometimes it requires upsizing. It can be protected by an increased maintenance frequency. We could fix broken or degraded pipes. We could construct small structures to improve pollutant removal before entry to the existing drainage system. That would have a water quality benefit, both either to groundwater or to the river, depending on what portion of the city we're in. We could construct small structures to improve the capacity of the existing drainage system, replace existing failing UICs, for example. We could reconfigure poorly performing existing swale. All those things fall under the category of maintaining or repairing the existing system. And that's one area we could focus our efforts. Another way we could choose to solve some of the problems is to install new facilities. And for example, this would be constructing drainage system in neighborhoods where none exist or very little exists. And one of the picture in the erosion and sediment problem slide with the house that is receiving a lot of runoff from the neighborhood, that would be an example of that. Oh yeah, thank you, Erin. That one would be an example of putting a new system where one doesn't really exist. There's not really much drainage infrastructure happening in that location. Okay, we could switch back. Or we could build regional stormwater swales or ponds to manage runoff in focused redevelopment areas. And there's some overlap with policy questions on that one that we haven't really talked about yet, but we'll talk about later in the year. But that's a brand new facility where one doesn't exist. So those are, right now, there's somewhat of a balance in the way the city is operating. We're interested in hearing, where do you think the focus should go? Repairing the existing system or extending the system where it doesn't currently exist, install new facilities?
Does anyone have any questions for Trista before we hear your thoughts on this one? Okay, well, let's pop down to slide 14. And let's use the bluish, greenish bubbles to indicate which of these is most important to you or feels right to you for emphasis in the plan.
Well, that was a quick response, the first one.
Yeah, who was that? They know their mind. This is very suspenseful.
It is.
Yeah, I think we may have, we had maybe 6, 7 folks last time, so we'll give a minute here for people to think this through.
And you're not committing yourself forever. You're
Nope,
allowed at
this
some
is-
point to change your mind.
Right, right. Half and half. Oof. Other folks?
Well, this is a tough one because it seems like there's so many factors, it's case by case. Like
Mm-hmm.
some might be better off maintenance and repair of existing facilities, and some might be better off all new. So
You're going to put your dot between the two boxes?
I mean, I guess if it was phrased like ideally, if money was no object and land was available and, yada, yada. Yeah. Let's go new. New and improved.
Mhm.
Who cares about maintaining them?
Well, and like the other question, both of these types of solutions will be recommended in the master plan. So it's sort of a matter of emphasis. I think we might think that staff would hope for a little bit more emphasis on maintenance and repair of existing facilities. Like they'd like to have, the unlimited funds to maintain and care for the existing system. And they don't, sadly. That's the reality of every city on the planet. So.
Yeah, this is helpful though, because it'll help us think about emphasis for developing options for us to review, and then also developing the criteria by which we evaluate those options.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you all. Let's move to slide 15. And I want to frame this one for us a little bit. So in March, at the March meeting, you shared some of those key considerations with the team. And we'd like you to think now just a little bit differently than that, more at a sort of a visionary level about the most important outcome that you think this plan can provide for our community. So we want you to take a box, each of you to take your own box and describe, just type right into the box, for you, what is the most important outcome from this stormwater master plan for our community? What is the most important outcome that this plan can achieve?
And we have inspiration if you feel like you need it. So let us know if you think on it for a minute and don't come up with something. We could give some examples.
Again, don't overthink it. Don't stress over your word choices. This is just a very helpful, almost as though you're kind of popcorning your thoughts to us, but a chance for you to be sure you're fully heard in our big group, and in a way that we can really collect your thinking and include it in our input report and shaping the team's thinking going forward. Don't overthink it. And yes, you can keep typing more if you need to go outside your box. It's okay.
Color outside the lines, folks.
Do it.
What am I doing wrong to not be able to type in a box?
You can also type your comments in the chat if you're having any trouble at all with this slide deck. And we'll be grabbing all the comments in the chat too if you need to drop your thoughts there.
Thanks for that time check, Aubrey. I think we're doing well on time. So.
It feels good. I just wanted to let folks know.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I like the box that basically says ditto.
yeah, everything. We do have we have a few more minutes for our discussion here. So I want to would anyone like to share your thoughts with all of us and what you shared in these boxes, and just elaborate any more on what you've written? Thank you, Brian. I got your comment here from the chat. So, consistency. I'm curious what this person meant by the word consistency. If you feel brave enough to share.
Oh yeah, I'm brave enough to share. It just seems at times things are applied more towards new development versus existing development. And I think it should be consistent across the entire plan, not just towards new or old or redevelopment, etc., infill stuff. So that's what I mean by consistency.
Okay. Yep. Excellent.
Thank you.
Management that recognizes we're moving toward urban dense development. So new recognizing the growth and changing patterns.
Yeah. I mean, by that, I kind of mean like surface water, managing stormwater on the surface is really not an option when you're trying to get dense also, right? So having subsurface options is really important for that.
Okay. Stormwater reuse. Okay, great.
Yeah.
We want to thank you all for playing along there. We only have one more question for you, and it's a bit of a temperature check on our group and how well informed you feel about stormwater funding. How is the system funded in Bend? And we're hoping you will take an orangish bubble and place it on the line to represent how well informed you feel, with 1 being not really very well informed at all, and 5 being extremely well informed about how we fund stormwater management in Bend. So just getting again a temperature check here to help us understand where our group is at right now. And they're anonymous, so if you're worried about us knowing whether you're an expert or not, don't worry, we won't. No names here. Okay.
No judgment.
Yeah.
No judgment zone.
All right, wonderful. It's very helpful.
Yeah,
So
that is.
it is. It's nice. It's good to know. But thank you all so much for using this interactive slide deck with us today, and really looking forward to continuing to gather your input and use it to help shape decision making on the plan. And with that, I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Aubrey.
Thank you both so much. Yeah, Stormwater Master Plan is going to be a reoccurring topic here as we move through summer with the subcommittee, and then also back in fall. So stay tuned for more.
And winter to spring.
Yes, and winter and spring.
Like the next year, basically.
Excellent. So I'm going to bring the slides back up here for Elizabeth, and I think I neglected to welcome Casey too. So Elizabeth, if you want to roll forward on our groundwater protectiveness topic.
Sure. So you can go to the next slide, Aubrey. We're going to jump right in. So why did we even do a new groundwater protectiveness study at the city? So our last study was completed in 2011. It really only looked at the unsaturated zone, which is kind of the area where there's no like aquifer, so higher than the aquifer, above the aquifer. It was a 1D model, and the main outcome of that study was that we needed 5 feet of vertical separation between the bottom of a UIC and the regional groundwater aquifer in order to maintain protectiveness for that aquifer.
And just to note, everybody remembers, I hope, that UIC is underground injection control facility. So that's a dry well, basically.
Yeah, so infiltration stormwater facilities is what we're talking about with this study. And so then to the next box, everyone knows Bend was seeing a lot of increased development density, and we were starting to see that developers were having challenges meeting existing horizontal well setback standards in the city, which was 500 feet. This 500 feet horizontal setback is also something that's in our WPCF permit from DEQ, our Water Pollution Control Facilities permit, that says how we're going to manage our public UIC system. So that's kind of where that standard originally came from. And as you can tell, that doesn't technically match what the protectiveness study said, which led to other problems later on. And then the third box, we were seeing at the city interest in new technologies for different kinds of drywall design systems that were much deeper than the original 20 feet ones. One that comes to mind is called a Maxwell. You may have heard of them. So people were asking the city if they could install these devices. We kind of paused on that, said we need to take another look at what the implications may be. So we wanted to do another groundwater protectiveness study. We also wanted to get some more clarity on what actually meets protectiveness today, both horizontally and vertically. So really aiming to have the study look at both vertical and horizontal transport of pollutants as opposed to just vertical. And then another aspect was we have some emerging pollutants that weren't looked at in the 2011 study. So as part of our WPCF permit from DEQ, we're supposed to do like an emerging pollutant study every 5 years. So, and I think that was done in 2022, the most recent one, and some pollutants were identified that we now wanted to look at in the new groundwater protectiveness study. And so our main goal for this new study was to kind of set some new policy for stormwater that was protective for groundwater, used most current and available data and hydrologic modeling methods, and to really tailor it to our geology and infrastructure here in Bend. Next slide. All right, so going back to kind of comparing the 2011 protectiveness study model and the one from the most recent one from 2024. So in 2011, the original intent of that protectiveness study was to show that existing UICs in the city that were within those DEQ setbacks of the 500 feet horizontal or a 2-year time of travel were still protective. And so part of the problem with that study was it had an original intent, and it was starting to be used to say that, oh, it says 5 feet of vertical separation are okay, so we want to install new facilities using that study, which wasn't really the original intent. And so it also looked at mainly sedimentary soils, like I mentioned before, unsaturated zone only, determine that 5-foot vertical separation, and also looked at all of the pollutants listed here. And a bunch of these we already monitor regularly in our monitoring plan. And so for the 2024 model, we're really hoping to get protectiveness guidance for both the existing and for any newly installed future UICs. For example, like some of those different designs that I mentioned where people are wanting to make deeper ones and things like that, and make sure that we can accommodate the type of dense development that the city's moving towards. And so this study was slightly different. It was actually looking at fractured basalt bedrock, looked at both the unsaturated zone and the saturated zones of kind of the different layers of ground that we have in Bend. And then it did determine both horizontal and vertical separation distances that were needed, And the pollutants we focused on were PFAS, which is highly mobile and persistent. You may have heard of it in the news before, and also simazine, which I'll talk more about them in the next slide. Okay, so what are PFAS and simazine? PFAS, they're a group of man-made chemicals. They're used in a lot of different manufacturing purposes, both consumer and industrial products since the 1940s. And they are known for breaking down very slowly over time. So sometimes people refer to them as like the forever chemicals, you may have heard. So they're in a lot of water-resistant fabrics, nonstick cookware, cleaning products, and then also on the industrial side, they're used regularly in firefighting foam because it helps repel the fire. And on the other side, simazine, that's just a herbicide. It's used to control broadleaf weeds and annual grasses. And both of these pollutants were identified as high risk for stormwater in that 2022 emerging pollutant report that I mentioned previously. So that report is something that DEQ requires permittees to submit. And so in the 2022 report, a bunch of different cities came together, kind of pulled their money and did the report together to identify the highest risk pollutants. So that's why we chose those two for the new study. Okay, so now kind of a little bit of a background in Bend. Aubrey, if you click again, some other information. There we go. Okay, so in Bend we have kind of two different areas of groundwater that the study talks about. So we have what's called a perch groundwater area. So it's regionally like physically separated from the regional groundwater aquifer, so separated from the drinking water aquifer. And we have two areas that were identified that kind of have this situation where it's like a layer of shallower groundwater below the ground. And so the first one is in kind of the northern part of Bend and roughly 110 feet below ground. And then the second one is shallower, kind of in the area of the Old Mill District at 10 feet below ground. And that one, and they both kind of follow like unique geologic layers that kind of cause these areas. And then we have the regional water table, which is the main drinking water aquifer, and that is down anywhere between 300 to 750 feet across the city.
I might add, Elizabeth, that while the regional water table is what we have our municipal wells drawing water from so City of Bend, and I believe, the other providers like Avion, but we do have information that suggests there may be private drinking water wells, like somebody who still has a well for their individual house that may be accessing the perched water table to the north.
Next slide. And so here is a map of those two areas that I mentioned. So they're shaded in light blue. So we have the one to the north, which for this report, it's referred to as the North Bend perched area. And then the one towards the south, we have called the Old Mill District perched area because it kind of follows along down there. And then all of the white dots that you see are water wells, and pretty much all of the ones in the North Bend area are private wells. So basically what Lori mentioned, they're privately owned wells used for domestic home purposes, and they are likely pulling from that perch aquifer because they're not typically drilled as deep as a municipal well is to get down to the lower regional aquifer. Next slide. Okay, so now on to the report highlights. The report found that PFAS and simazine do not reach the regional water table, so the 300 to 750 foot one, the one that the city uses for their municipal wells and Avion and roads, which is good. And then we found that PFAS, which has a 53-foot vertical transport, and simazine with a 36 feet vertical transport, can reach areas with perched groundwater. And so because they can reach those areas, GSI developed some horizontal setback distances that would be required in order to meet protectiveness in those specific areas. And so in the North Bend, that setback for PFAS, and we looked specifically at PFOA, which is a type of PFAS, just for clarity, is 75.5 feet horizontally. So horizontally from the UIC system. And then simazine, it was lower, it was less than 10 feet. And then in the Old Mill District, so again, that perched area was only about 10 feet deep from the surface. So it has a higher horizontal setback need at 98.4 feet, and then a horizontal setback at 39.5 feet.
Yeah, there were two. Were there only 2 wells in the Old Mill District?
Can you go back to the map?
Yeah, I think one is a city well.
I think more of our concern there, Brian, is that seems to be water that's probably coming in through old alluvial soils from the Deschutes, so the connection to the river itself may be there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure that there is. Okay.
Okay, and then so that the table is really just for those special areas, but then we also have to note that PFAS can still transport horizontally in the unsaturated zone, which is really for the rest of the city that's outside of these areas. So, and this is because we would still need, setbacks in the rest of the city horizontally, because if PFAS were to enter and transport that distance and it wasn't 29 feet away, it could intercept the well casing if it's not constructed correctly and then travel down the well into the aquifer. And then for simazine, it was a little lower. It was 24 feet. Do we have a question? I think there's a question in the chat. Is there any suggestion that the vertical transport figure is just a point in time and that the depth of this point? Okay, so the vertical transport that the model did, it was over 110 years. So at 110 years of time from the point of entry was when you would get transport this far. And they had to set it up that way because they were looking for the model to stabilize. Casey may be able to explain it a little better, but it had to be 110 years over time for this model. Does that answer the question?
Okay. Kind of. They took the models till they stabilized, right? So however many years of modeling to, well, yeah, it always depends on the models. You're right. But that was it was over a long period of time to get to the point where it seemed like that's as far as it's going to go. Based on it being a model, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. So then how's this kind of going to impact our standards for UICs in the city? So the current standards are that we're not allowing UICs within 2-year time of travel zones. So that's really just the municipal wells that even have those zones delineated. And then for any wells that don't have a 2-year time of travel, the current standards are to maintain a 5-foot horizontal setback. And again, these original requirements were based on our permit from DEQ. It's basically the standard requirements they put in every permit. And then for the existing protectiveness report, the 2011 one, so the old one, it was to maintain 5 feet of vertical separation from the bottom of the UIC. And that really gave us no requirement for horizontal separation. And so that's kind of what we're moving away from with this new report. And so next slide. So this would be what we're imagining could be potential new standards for UICs. So we have kind of 2 objectives. The first one is to provide standards that are very simple and implementable for development. And as part of that, we're looking to base standards on the 2 perched areas versus everywhere else in the city that's not perched. So to kind of have 2 different standards based on if you're in a perched area on that map or not. And then the second objective we have is to maintain minimum setback requirements from water wells that also aligns with Oregon Health Authority requirements and the study results for disposal. So basically the Oregon Health Authority currently has a 100-foot horizontal setback requirement from any type of stormwater facility and a water well. But this is really only checked when a well is installed, not when any UIC is installed after the fact around the well. So trying to create some consistency between different state requirements in Oregon. And then in non-perched areas, we would like to also maintain that horizontal setback minimum of 100 feet from all wells, plus the 53-foot vertical separation, unless a 2-year time of travel was modeled by the state.
And that's just extra protection for our municipal drinking water wells.
Right. So for this study, it only looked at typical stormwater values. It didn't look at any kind of spills or anything like that. So by maintaining the 2-year time of travel, that gives the city a little bit of extra protection and time if something were to spill around a municipal well. And so our next steps for this project, the first 2 we've kind of already done. So we brought the study results to the Oregon Association of Clean Water Agencies Stormwater Committee members and gotten their feedback, because some of what we found could potentially impact what they do in their cities or how they think about doing a new protectiveness study. It's not totally black and white and transferable to them because the geology is different in Bend, but it's just nice for us to get their feedback. And then after that, we discussed the study results with DEQ, which they received well, and they are willing to incorporate into their requirements and possibly also into our upcoming newly issued permit from them. And then, so today we're at the gather feedback from the UPAG group stage. And then after today, we'll be using the study recommendations to refine and develop those location-based standards, and also any standards specific to various types of UIC installations in Bend. So like, for example, those extra deep ones that people are interested in using. And then in coordination with the stormwater master plan process, we can also develop alternatives for disposal in those special areas where people can't meet requirements. So maybe in one of those perched areas, you can't put a UIC in because it's not deep enough, and you also can't meet your horizontal setback. What are the options, for your development project? Possibly just surface infiltration facilities in those cases. So we still have some details to work out. But that's kind of where we're at with this new protectiveness study. And then we had 2 focus questions. The first one, do you feel area-specific standards or simplified standards that can be applied to broader areas would be more beneficial or implementable?
I'm gonna stop screen sharing here and I'll just copy those into the chat too, so folks can reference them.
So the thinking is, should we, I think where we're headed is probably proposing tighter standards for those areas with perched groundwater and not as tight of standards in the areas that don't have the perched groundwater. So that does make things a little more complicated for application. That would probably be based on like a map, versus the other choice is just to apply the most stringent of those standards everywhere.
Or if there are general comments or questions. I know this is kind of a big, meaty topic that's dealing with a lot of emerging issues, and the city's trying to be proactive here. There's clarifying questions or other things that folks are curious about.
I guess I would say I'm really glad that the city's taken this on, because this is something that we deal with all the time. In the 500-foot, it's very difficult to go into other people's properties and even find if they have wells within 500 feet, because the way the well logs are, they just put you in the center of a section or the center of a quarter section. There's actually you have no idea where the well is at when you look at the logs. And so this makes the search radius much smaller. But I think that since the more restrictive thing applies to a much smaller footprint in Bend, having site-specific standards makes sense.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that's a tough one, not knowing exactly where those private wells are, that is just kind of associated with a parcel.
Yeah, it's something that we deal with all the time, especially when you're in an expansion area, because you know that the people that are not in have wells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're being served by Avion, which is also the case often. It also doesn't clarify between the use of the well, whether it's an irrigation well or a potable water well. It just says a well.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I see, Rick, you added some comments to the chat that the site-specific, location-specific standards also seem to make sense. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Sure. Yeah, I think the site-specific is definitely a way to go because of unique conditions on different parts of the community. So your example of the perched water tables is really good, but also with just different soils and the soil types, different infiltration rates, the KSAT values, all that with the soils. I think if there's a broad approach where there's kind of one or two standards that are broadly applied across different environmental conditions, the effectiveness of those approaches would vary considerably. I guess that's it. I'm typing up a response with the UIC standards, and that's something. It's interesting with climate change and the change in precipitation patterns and intensities of the storms and these influxes of stormwater. I think working with either the old or the new standards for UICs might miss an opportunity to think kind of outside the box and come up with some other ideas that may look at stormwater as a resource here in Central Oregon, especially as we continue moving into drought conditions or maybe more extreme drought conditions in the future. We may not want to just try approaches like the Valley has where they want to just get rid of stormwater, but we might want to kind of embrace that as a resource and think of ways that we can actually use that to help support the community instead of just trying to flush it down the drain, so to speak.
Thanks, Rick.
Sure.
Any other thoughts from the group on either question, really? Since Rick stepped us into the, if you have any thoughts on the UIC standards, we're ready for a change. Other considerations there, opportunities.
I mean, I would
Brian?
just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just thinking, I mean, I do like the idea of having a lesser setback, especially if it's defensible. That's great. I think the city has also reduced their setback from dry wells to fire hydrants to 25 feet instead of 70 feet, which is also really, really helpful because that was almost impossible to meet, again, when you're doing dense urban development and stuff. So those two things I think are moves in the right directions. And yeah, as far as using the UICs, I think that's definitely a tool that we need in our toolbox for this stuff.
Thank you. And I think I heard, Mike, were you chiming in too?
Yeah, I was just basically concurring with Rick and Brian. I mean, I think it needs to be site specific. It might be a little more cumbersome, but
Yeah.
You know, broad citywide guidelines, I don't think are gonna really work. Everything we do is site specific. Why not this too? You know.
Yeah.
I wanted to note, I noticed that I think just in during Elizabeth's presentation, I think Mark Buckley joined us, and Mark, if you look in the chat, you'll see and I think he could still go make comments on the earlier presentation, and it probably wouldn't be that hard. So if you want, Mark, you could click on that link that's up a ways in the chat if it shows up for you. It links you to a Google Doc version of the presentation that was made about the stormwater master plan. And I think this is for everybody. Can folks, if they think of other things, can they go back and add some more comments to that presentation? Do you want to give them a little more time or not? But Mark, you'll find some slides in there towards the end of it, slides 12 through 16, where there were some dots you could move around. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think you need to have heard all the details of the presentation to figure out how to move the dots around, but I leave that up to you. But I also wondered with our consultant team, would you like folks to have, like, if they think more particularly about, I still have it open on my screen. There was slide 15 that was, what is your top priority outcome from the stormwater master plan? And maybe you're even thinking of things after hearing about the groundwater protectiveness, that I guess I wouldn't mind letting people add more stuff if, maybe like that, I don't know, give them till the end of the day or something.
Trista, how does that sound to you?
That sounds perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
We'll take a snapshot at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Aubrey, I'll repost that link right now. Maybe we can follow up after this call on whether we want to send a note around or something.
Oh yeah, it looks like you have to repost the link because Ryan, I'm sorry, Ryan, you had to join partway through too.
I'll repost it right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll
thanks
share the link via email too, and just as a quick follow-up to this, and let folks take to the end of the day here if you want to add thoughts. Sometimes it's good to sit with things for a little bit.
Thanks.
Nice.
I'll make sure to do that.
Thanks, Mark. Elizabeth, anything else that you wanted to talk through on the ground?
I'll just say I think the results were really good for the city. I don't want anyone to be alarmed by any of them. They were better, I think better than we expected, because PFAS can be a scary topic and people talk about it being a forever chemical and very mobile. But we found that, it didn't really go as far as we thought it would. So that's good. And we're really lucky here to have such a large distance between the regional aquifer and the surface. So I think we're in a good position, and hopefully we'll come out with standards that are easier for our denser development to implement as well.
Great. Well, I'm just gonna flash up on the screen a quick reminder of our next steps here. And that looks like our stormwater walking tour in June. That's June 5th. Same typical time, but if you want to hang out and enjoy lunch at 12:30 or thereabouts and chat with folks a bit, we welcome that. It'll be a summer break through July and August for the big group, but we do have those five folks who raised their hand to participate in July and August to dig in on a couple of these topics, and then we're going to be back at it in September. So that's a quick look forward. There'll be some more communication here, of course, per usual. You can reach out to us if you have questions in the meantime on logistics, but we'll also be likely over the summer seeking some input on bigger picture process and giving you a better idea of our meeting roadmap moving forward. And I don't know, Laura, if you wanted to add on topics in the fall at all, kind of what to expect.
Yeah, topics in the fall. I mean, we'll definitely, you can expect to regularly hear about the stormwater master plan and being asked for more input as we go along and have like options to talk about and start wanting to evaluate things. So that's all coming. That'll be fall, winter as well. And then on the water conservation side, we will definitely have more to talk about as we're rolling out this summer the new turf removal rebate programs. We're going to be rolling out, presumably City Council will be adopting in June new code. It's actually new code that will relate to the right-of-way prohibition on, turf grass in the right-of-way, and what we'd like to see instead. That would get rolled out in the fall after the council adoption. Similar timeline for erosion control, where we have to apply erosion control to smaller parcels starting in November, and we have to get the code in place. And then the subcommittee will help us during the summer to figure out how to best roll that out to work with small builders and such. But anyways, back to topics for the fall, there'll be more discussion about how rolling out those programs has worked, and doing some more analysis on kind of cost benefits of all of the water conservation program.
Well, we've got 5 minutes. If there's any final thoughts here from anybody on the UPAG related to any of our topics, I'll just give it another beat more. It's nice, Trevor and Joe. We're glad to have you join us for this one, and Matt, looks like you're pinch hitting, or maybe joining us moving forward. It's good to have you join us as well.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be here.
Awesome. Yeah, and we hope to see everybody hopefully in person in June at the field trip. I think it will be really interesting. I like being able to walk around and kick the tires on things. I think it helps us really have a just more in-depth conversation about some of these topics. And like Aubrey had said, there's an RSVP to reply to. That's just mostly so we have a head count, because we will be going out and buying lunch for everybody. And then you're also welcome to, if you have somebody like in your office or something you'd like to bring, that's fine as well. And we'll do our best to order up really nice weather for that.
We did pretty well last year, so maybe we'll get it again.
We did.
Casey
has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm Casey. I work with GSI Water Solutions, and I'm helping on the stormwater master plan with the groundwater side. And I just wanted to mention that in the fall, we might be looking to get your input in terms of we're developing a strategy for prioritizing drill hole upgrades and replacements. So that might be coming as well in the fall, hopefully.
Thank you, Casey.
Always good to have a few teasers here for what lies ahead. Ryan.
Hey everyone, sorry to join late too. I was in an EPA meeting and Sierra couldn't make it today, so sorry about that. I just wanted, and I missed the most important part Not that the rest wasn't important, but stormwater master plan stuff is obviously most relevant. And I just wanted to point out the MS4 permit has stormwater retrofit strategy requirements that sort of may, and you probably already know that, but it may come into play with the master plan a little bit. So just something to think about.
Yes, thanks, Ryan. And we do have that in the scope for the master plan. We'll be talking
Awesome.
about retrofits that to help treat untreated stormwater before it gets into the river.
That's great. And that would have been one of my biggest priorities if I could, and I'll go back and put that on there, but
You can go
retrofits
in
are a
and
big
put
deal.
dots on things. That would be great.
Done.
Yeah. And
Excellent.
and just to note, I know I think Bronwyn's still on as well, but a lot of those outfalls are in Ben Parks and Rec parks, and so we're having conversations with the Parks District as well about how we can best work together on some projects that you folks have identified as well. So I'm pretty excited about being able to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's an interesting kind of permit consideration too there that I don't know that we've talked about a lot with the MS4 permit. So that's great.
Yeah, having a different a separate organization that manages parks versus the city who holds the stormwater permit. Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad you're talking.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we can close things out for today, but a big thank you to everybody for your time, for being here. And we're excited about our June tour. Hope you all can make it. And if you have questions in the meantime, of course, reach out to us. We'll send a few links here via email as a follow-up to today's conversation. But a big thanks to our speakers and UPAG.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you,
everybody's time.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.